make way for the next panel here. I really want to tee this off for the next one, because when we talk about building artificial intelligence, which is synthetic, which is man-made, we got to understand why we're building and how we're building it, and I think that's the core of the next discussion. As some of you have worked with us to build this whole responsible, secure AI for future project. The one thing that is key about that is how can we do it with the sense of responsibility, because as you'll hear, I don't want to break the thunder for Sounil and Kay and others who are going to talk about it here, but I think it's going to be important for us to discuss in the right light. So for the next panel, I would like to call upon stage Sounil, Toufi, Saliba, come on up. David, Bray, I don't know if David is on. Oh my God, you made it. So to the T, and then Kay is here. Let's go. All right. It's usually I know my panelists very well because we have worked years together, and I have had the great fortune to have worked with them in person. But this is for the first time. I was actually, believe it or not, Val was out and about in the world, and our friends were putting things together. So I am so glad to meet like my panelists in the first time in person. So great. All right, let's take a seat. And we have some neighbors also, like Texas. All right. Yes. All right. So this is. This panel is going to probably take the last two discussions we have had. One around the evolving, responsibility of the CISOs growing every day, and now it has become, quite a bit of challenging for us to even, deal with what we had, and now we have generative AI. Of course, AI has been there for long. The next part is what's the basic principle we build this on, right? And somebody's building, it's the developers who are building this. There are data. There are now synthetic data scientists who are building data to feed into it. That is what we're going to talk about today. Of course, I want to hear your specific points of view on the areas that you work. Okay, but let's start with introduction.
My name is Toufi Saliba. I'm the author of Toda IP protocol. It's a communication protocol. 2.5 years ago was the AGI summit in California, and was invited by a bunch of AI scientists to partake in building the Internet of AI, and at the same time, I do my, not-for-profit with the IEEE. I currently head the international protocols for AI security, and it's effectively the security of AI as opposed to using AI for security.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I'm Kay Firth-Butterfield, and I am actually the other Texan here, despite the accent. I started my life as a barrister and then became a judge in the UK, and I hated being a judge. So I went to America, Austin, and became a professor. And it was at that stage, and I'm a human rights lawyer by background, it was at that stage that I started becoming absolutely fascinated with the interaction between machines and people. And that was back in 2010. So I actually became the world's first chief AI ethics officer in 2014. So I've been actually at the coalface now on this for a decade. And it's wonderful that this year everybody's talking about it. I too led the IEEE's work on ethical systems in AI from 2015. In 2017, I became the inaugural head of AI at the World Economic Forum and sat on the executive committee until this year, when I started my own company, which is called Good Tech Advisory, to really sort of help companies, governments, non-profits sort out all these problems around responsible AI.
That's fascinating for a number of reasons. First is, I am the Chief AI Safety Officer at a startup that I just founded. And I use those words precisely for a reason, because I was also looking to find out who was the first chief AI safety officer, but I clearly used the wrong keywords. Prior to where I am now, I was the chief scientist at Bank of America, and I'm also an author of a book, which I didn't bring up, but it's called the Cyber Defense Matrix, and it has been useful to help us frame how do we tackle cybersecurity. But we'll talk about this later. I think it's important that we pivot from cybersecurity into something that's more important than even that, which is AI safety, AI ethics.
Greetings, my name is David Bray. I am a distinguished fellow and co-chair for the Luminous Innovation Council at the Stimson Center. Stimson Center was created in the late 80s when some forward-leaning members of Congress realized that, on the one hand, the fall of the Soviet Union was a good thing, but at the same time, there was going to be a whole lot of unemployed nuclear scientists. And so they had a very interesting effort which linked US businesses with those former nuclear scientists to say, what do you want to do aside from building nuclear devices? And so later when they went to find WMDs in Iraq, there was no sign of Russian involvement in actually informing the WMD investments. So we were successful. So we exist to try and prevent World War III through Track 2 and other terms. What I did in the past, I was crazy enough to be hired by the US government when I was 15, later working on classified efforts, did bioterrorism preparedness response, including it was scheduled weeks in advance for me to give a briefing to the CIA and the FBI as to what we would do technology-wise should a bioterrorism event happen. That briefing just happened to be scheduled for September 11th, 2001 at 9 o'clock in the morning. 8:34, the world changed. We piled computers in the cars because that's how you did information sharing back then, is you physically carry the systems. And set up an underground bunker. That was response to 9/11. Stood down from high alert on October 1st, briefed the CIA on October 3rd, only to have the first case of answer act show up 24 hours later. It was a very busy time. Fast forward, I was later in Afghanistan in 2009 with the promise that I could basically identify challenges and solutions that they didn't know were challenges yet. After about 45 days in, I said, why are we still here? And they said, what do you mean? I said, literacy is 20%, and that's if you're a male. Yet we said we're going to bring democracy here somehow in the next 1 to 2 years. Not sure it's going to work. Instead, I would either recommend you exit and you basically go to the 13 different tribes, pay them aid, or invite the UN to play a peacekeeping role. But there's no other way that this is going to succeed. That got buried. We saw what happened, sadly, about 12 years later. And I would sadly observe, because I really enjoyed the conversation that came right before this, I feel like the United States and other Western societies have become more like Afghanistan in the last 15 years than the other way around. Last thing I will say real quick, I had the honor to serve as the CIO at the Federal Communications Commission, where prior to my arrival, they'd had 9 CIOs in 8 years, which is always a great sign for CIO number 10 that things are just going great. Good news is, again, I lasted there for about 4 years. We moved everything that the FCC had to either public cloud or private hosting back in 2015. That reduced our O&M spend from 85% to less than 35%, which saves millions of dollars. At the same time, come 2017, we did experience a disinformation attack in which I was in the crosshairs. Long story, we had a high-profile proceeding where I asked to use CAPTCHA. They said you can't use CAPTCHA. If someone can't see and hear, they might not be able to file. I said, could I use reCAPTCHA? They said, nope, because that's technically seen as surveillance because it puts a cookie on someone's machine. I said, can I block obvious spam? They said, nope, because one of those 100 comments a minute might actually be a human. And so we got 23 million comments in 120 days, including 6,000 comments a minute at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. So people say, like, well, what's your reason for thinking these aren't all real? I said, patterns of life. They said, that's not forensics. But regardless, I was somehow claimed that somehow I made it up that this was somehow a denial of service at the application layer. Fast forward to 2021, turns out that the New York Attorney General concluded 18 million of the 23 million comments we got were generated by bots and submitted by bots. 9 million from one side of the political aisle that hired 6 companies to do it. 9 million from the other side of the aisle that had teenagers do the same thing.
Well, that's a very interesting, as you can see, the overall panel. So let's dive into it. You know, the premise of this discussion is to equip the defenders, who most of these community members are, with tools, you know, principles and practices that they can take up, that they can use those, you know, principles to create and help defend the AI ecosystem that we're building. So maybe start with you, Toufi, and then go down.
Sure. I think we're entering an unprecedented time that I argued that we cannot have security done on AI using a human. I truly believe, or I should say I know from where I stand, because I see some of those things that we can use cryptography to secure, we can use AI to operate cryptography to secure other AI, but we cannot rely on human anymore to give us the security.
Yeah. So not human anymore. So AI, defending AI, is that okay, you think?
I am a great believer in human and machine augmentation. I think that we need to be working together, especially at the moment where AI systems don't work terribly well. And until we've got our AI systems working better, I think that we need to have the human in the loop. Also, we need to have the human in the loop because it's what makes us human. And although this seems as if it's defending against attacks is something that is mechanical, I do think that there is a need for us to think as humans in the work that we do, in whatever work that we do. And so I think certainly for the next 5 years, we should be saying AI not really ready, generative AI especially not really ready, and we could talk about hallucinations and then cannibalism if we want to go back to that. And so definitely at the moment we're human and machine together.
Well, that's if you look at the logo of CFF, we keep the human in the front. I don't know when the wires are going to be connected and how far, but it looks like we still have them on the front, pretending to be. So thank you, Kate, for keeping human in the loop. Sounil.
So I think we actually have our priorities wrong when it comes to AI security. For every $1 that we spend in AI security, I would want to spend $100 in AI safety. I think the worst, something that's worse than an insecure AI system is one that is very secure, but is also unsafe. So if you remember the Matrix movie, how did Trinity break into the Matrix? Because of a vulnerability, okay? So again, I'm glad that there was a vulnerability, because otherwise, well, the movie wouldn't be very interesting otherwise. But the point is, I would rather make sure that we focus on safety as a first principle and then security as a second principle. So we think we have the priorities wrong. But secondly, I think there's an opportunity, there's a huge, huge opportunity for CISOs, those of us who are in cybersecurity, to actually do cyber safety, so to do AI safety. And the reason why is because I think most of what we actually do is cyber safety. Now, in the German language, and many languages, the word for security and safety are the same, right? And in English, we have 2 words. In cybersecurity, we have 1 word again. And if you're not sure of the distinction, well, let's add some words in front of it. So what is food safety all about? Hygiene, compliance, inspections. Does that sound familiar to what we do in cybersecurity? I think the answer is yes. So I would say most of us already practice cyber safety, and we can naturally pivot into what I think is a fundamentally different but more important problem, which is AI safety. And so that's, I think, the emphasis and the opportunity for us as we look at the future of our own careers. Where do we see ourselves in the next 10 years? And I don't think it's going to be cybersecurity. I think it's going to be AI safety.
So I like to do jazz improv, so I'm going to try and build off the melodies that I heard from everybody here and see if I can pull it together. I love the point about we need to think about safety as being a larger Venn diagram than security by itself. I will give you an even larger one, which is information discernment. I have been in conversations with our UK partners, with our US government over the last 6 months. There are pockets that are coming to the realization that it's going to be near impossible to distinguish what's authentic versus inauthentic in the public space by 2030, if not earlier. Pause for a moment there. If you haven't experimented with generative AI to ask it produce things involving your company's brand, it can. Which means who in your company is responsible if you experience a disinformation attack? Is that the job of the CISO? And the trouble with disinformation attacks, as one who's experienced it, is you cannot come out and say that's not true, because you just give oxygen to it. We haven't figured out good ways to respond when you experience something that's not true. And this is a challenge for companies, for individuals. And it's also a challenge because I was on a UNGA panel in September where there were 5 women and myself. Right now, when women choose to run for office, they get 10 to 15 times the amount of harassment, hate, and vitriol than their male counterparts do. And there's evidence, and that's why I was partly there, 80% or more of it's spot generated. Generative AI is going to make this worse. And of course, they can't come out and say that's not true. But if more than half of our planet cannot run for political office out of fear that they'll put their families through that, something's fundamentally wrong. And I will say real quick, and then because I love what Kay said too, I'm also part of a nonpartisan group that's looking at how elections might be digitally interfered with. In the last 5 months, we've seen things move from trying to use bots for social media, partly because social media is currently on fire, platform notwithstanding, to now it's manipulating search engine optimizations, which means it can push certain things to page 1, push other things to page 2 or 3, and it even can convince the Google Knowledge Panel, the so-called Google Knowledge Panel, of things that are not true. And I've been working with Google, I'm friends with Surf. It takes more than 8 weeks. And even then, they say we cannot explicitly tell the algorithm what it thinks is truth. So I raise that because I think this is, in some respects, it's not meant to make you go, oh dear. It's just to make you realize information discernment plus cyber safety is all part and parcel here.
Sure. So I'll go to Kay and then Sounil, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to the point that you were making about women and serving in office. We have been seeing in law where people have taken the images of women who have given evidence in cases and made deepfake pornographic images from them to undermine their credibility in legal cases. I just came from a conversation that we were having about red lines in AI, and we could talk about that later. But, Julie Inman-Grant, who's the online safety commissioner in Australia, she was there and she was talking about the fact that they have just been able to have someone jailed for taking a female public figure and creating pornographic images. This is not something that is just happening over there. It's very mainstream. And we should be aware, you said 2030, but actually over half of the world's population by GDP will vote this year. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, when we're talking about security, it's a problem.
Yes.
So, by 2030, I think it's going to happen sooner. Yes. But there's a story that we can learn from that in terms of what we've done in security, which is we see things that we need to detect and respond to, and we say, okay, what are the preventative measures? And we should be aware of those preventative measures. So, for example, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, C2PA, they're trying to make sure that every manufacturer, anyone who produces digital content is authenticated at the source of when it's made, right? We understand zero trust as a principle, and this is exactly a similar principle that's being applied. The whole creating deepfakes, detecting fake deepfakes is a 10-foot ladder, 11-foot wall, 12-foot ladder, 13-foot wall pattern that we've repeated ourselves over and over again, which we would rather not repeat, right? So how do we be very proactive? And again, this is why I believe that we cybersecurity practitioners have something really to offer here. Let me also offer a second way. So one of the things that we oftentimes struggle with is just understanding how to put our arms around the problem. And David mentioned information discernment. Let me actually challenge those words for a moment, because I would use slightly different words. There's a model that we can use to help us understand the shape of what's to come. And it's called the DIKW, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. Wisdom is where discernment comes in. But we have this data and information and knowledge. And what we've seen is this progression where we've seen technologies allow us to really create data, use data, maximize the use of data, and so on and so forth. And with this aggregation of data, which is now information, and now the synthesis and inference and the understanding of that, which is knowledge. I believe that tools like ChatGPT have put us into the knowledge age. And at this knowledge age, we still need human discernment, okay? But furthermore, it gives us a pattern to what to look for. Data security, information security. What exactly is knowledge security? Data governance, information governance. What exactly is knowledge governance? Data provenance, information, I'm not sure what information provenance is, but the point is, the shape of what's to come is visible now through this simple pattern that we can do to say, okay, we need to figure out, we know the shape of what's to come, we don't know the substance of it. And with this simple model, we can now put our arms around what's to come and be planning for it as well.
So I'll try to build on that real quick and then go to Toufi, because you should have a chance to weigh in. But I want to build on what you say and try to be constructive. Little side note, my PhD actually was on knowledge ecosystems. And it was actually a posit that it's impossible to manage knowledge. Because if you know what knowledge is useful at any given context, then you're omniscient. And if you're omniscient, you don't need to worry about managing knowledge because you can already see the future. And so it's more about trying to create the probability of serendipity that the right information that can become knowledge is present at the right time. And I would also say there's the challenge of beliefs. A lot of what we think is true is actually really beliefs. And we could have a whole other conversation about how the perception of reality sometimes matters much more than reality. And that's what we do as CISOs and CIOs. But that said, I want to say two things from the 30,000 foot level. One, if you look at it, we've succeeded over the last 40 to 50 years in the democratization of technologies that were only available to the CIA and the KGB 40 or 50 years ago. Your phone is a multi-ent device. But that's also terrifying when you think about now in a world that has 8.1 billion people, give or take, more than 50% of them connected to the internet, having the capabilities themselves of doing disinformation, of doing geo-int, of doing satellite images that are relevant within 15 minutes or less. How that can disrupt the world. What we have not done is the tradecraft that those agencies do to triangulate what is considered to be valid. There's a reason why those agencies and other governments hire 15,000 or more analysts, and even they get it wrong. Most people don't have access to 15,000 analysts. Most people don't have access to even an hour or two to discern what they've called up on the web. And so what we really need to think about is how do we actually make that tradecraft more available to the individual using a combination of human and machines? And that's why I use information discernment, but we can go later as to knowledge as beliefs. The other thing that I would also say is it could very well be that we are building bridges using faulty engineering techniques. And what do I mean by that? We are currently experiencing a live open world experiment in double down on deep learning. Deep learning is the 1980s technology. Deep learning is only as good if the present and future is indicative in the past training sets. And if you're in healthcare, if you're in space, if you're in national security, I can guarantee you your present and future is going to be wildly different than what the past had. And that's why these things blow up. Not to get too geeky, but later there's this thing called active inference, which instead of having one brain to rule them all, has millions of them that are locally optimizing that really get really good at. I'm really good at understanding how busy this hotel is going to be. But I don't try to figure out everything in the world. And then there's another one that figures out flights coming in and out of Davos. And so the example I would give is imagine if we did see a ship get stuck in the Suez Canal. No human and no current generative AI system that's using deep learning would have been able to predict that less than 48 hours later, we would have a container shipping crisis in the LA region, let alone that the futures markets for metals would be going up because people would be realizing they'd have to build more containers, let alone realizing that because the containers are getting expensive, you're going to see more cars coming through, but less small objects because it's too expensive to do that. Active inference, however, by locally optimizing active inference as well can also begin to challenge and say, I see that there's this image, but it doesn't seem to fit the reputation of this individual, and somehow it might not be real. So it could be we're just building bad bridges.
System of systems we can connect and communicate with each other than just having one.
Well, and in some respects, we're doing active inference here.
Yeah.
We're all bringing our different knowledges and beliefs, and we're trying to make sense of them. But I just raise that because as CISOs, we may need to start standing up and saying, you're asking me to cross that bridge, but you can't tell me exactly how you built it, let alone what materials, what data you used to build it, because that's the other thing here is we need data cooperatives. Maybe that bridge is not a good bridge after all.
Yep.
I think there's something that from cybersecurity perspective that I feel like we're not really discussing, and I'm not sure why. And I feel like if we were to look at what's the one thing that could have some certain existential threat, but at the same time, it could be the best opportunity that ever existed in the history of humanity. What is that one thing that is actually happening as we speak? And why is it that every single entity in the world is racing to get to that one thing, whether it is the Chinese government or the US government, whether it is Microsoft or Google? What is that one thing? It's AGI. So what is AGI? How many of you have heard of AGI? Please raise a hand. Cool. For those that don't know, artificial general intelligence is, I mean, there are many definitions, but one of the definitions that folks are racing to get to is when you have that AI that is capable to do from every single aspect, as opposed to having narrow AI, but it's very cohesive, and because it's very cohesive, it's capable to do better than any single Homo sapien that exists on the planet today. Now, because this is very cohesive, it's capable, if you give it enough computing power, it's capable to do better than all humanity combined. So let's say I control this AGI. Let's say I get to AGI first. And if I control it through this remote control and I tell it, AGI, what makes you 10 times better? It's going to respond with something, some parameters. It's going to say, I need 10 days, I need $1 billion. If I give it $1 billion and I give it 10 days, and I ask that exact same question 10 days from now, what is it going to say? Chances are it's going to be less than 10 days, less than $1 billion. No, effectively, that's why they're racing towards that AGI, okay? Because that exponentially, in about 40 days or 50 days, you can get to something that is 1 trillion times more powerful than all humanity combined. And if you control that thing, what you think is ethical is not necessarily what I think is ethical or what he thinks is ethical. And that centralized control is effectively, that could be the biggest mistake that we can ever make, no matter how safe, no matter how secure. It is the attack from within that could actually exterminate the entire civilization that we have today. And that race is happening as we speak. It's not like something that, oh, will happen in the future. It's actually happening as we speak. It could happen any moment. So I feel like that is on a side of a certain existential threat that perhaps we can talk about 99 different existential threats, but where's the opportunity? If we do it right, if we do this thing right, meaning that not a single entity controls this thing, if all humanity combined to, Kai, what she mentioned, the human is in the picture, but how? If there's 8 billion people, they are the governance of this thing, so no single entity can actually control this thing towards exterminating people that look like me, for example, or whatnot. If we do it right, the biggest opportunity that ever existed on this earth, as far as we know, is that we're giving birth to something that can outlive us, that's something that can travel at the speed of light. We've been here for 200,000 years. If anybody tells you that we're going to be here forever, it would be like delusional. It's happening as we speak. This is an unprecedented moment that we are facing, either an existential threat from a cybersecurity perspective or the biggest opportunity. And I really think that from cybersecurity perspective, we should perhaps talk about what measures we should do and work together to prevent that existential threat. Believe me, I worry about deepfake, but not as much as existential threat. And I think we should all.
So I think the whole concept of AGI has been, evolving, and all of a sudden we are in a space where you really think it's possible any day. And I get that, but nothing's going to stop it, right? Nothing's going to stop it. And that's what will come to you in a moment. The thing is, there are 33,000 researchers who said, don't stop building generative AI, right? I mean, some of the most influential researchers went out, including probably Elon, who has thumb on everything and stuff. But nobody could stop it, right? So I think the pace at which things are moving will increase, but also it's going to happen. And I think that's the reality that we have to face.
Let's make it right.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, there's actually still some debate. I mean, Andrew Ng, who's been around here, Davos, will say no. But you know what? The thing is, Nick Bostrom had a wonderful thought experiment about paper clips. If you haven't read the paperclip thought experiment, definitely worth reading. You don't need AGI to turn us all to have a machine improperly aligned with our values, turn us all into paper clips. And I use this analogy. Some of y'all have heard it already. We find this magic lamp. We rub it. Genie pops out. companies think, oh wow, this LLM is going to make us a lot of money, so we want to be like Midas. We want to turn everything we touch into gold. We quickly realize it's a curse. Okay, how many wishes do we have? Do we have one or do we have three? If we have three, the second wish is usually, okay, clearly I made a mistake. Let me put some guardrails in. Those guardrails there, don't be racist, don't tell me how to make napalm bombs, don't tell me how to hotwire a car. Okay, and so we list a bunch of those guardrails, and we're like, okay, I think we're good. And a few days later, we realize, I forgot about biological weapons. Okay, so we have a third wish. Third wish, the genie comes up a third time and says, look, you got to be exhaustive in describing what are your ethics, what does responsible mean, what is safe. And if you ask China, you get one answer. And if you ask, in fact, I wanted to ask Mandeep this question. I would wonder how relations are between two countries that have almost separate value systems, right? But the point is that clearly we don't have the same value systems. And so what is safe, responsible, ethical, all that is going to be very different within organizations, within jurisdictions, within countries, all these different things. And so that is a really, really hard challenge. And I just want to say that we don't need a genie turning everything into gold is a very stupid system, okay? Yet it'll be extraordinarily efficient at doing what we ask it to do. Do we have one wish or do we have three wishes?
All right, maybe we have many more, okay? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we often say, well, we don't believe in the same things as they do in China or India or Brazil. But actually, PwC did a study that looked at all the ethical principles for AI that had been produced around the world. And they found out that actually we all do believe in the same things. We all do believe that these systems should be transparent. They should not be biased. They should be accountable and explainable. We should keep human agency. So it's not that we don't believe in the same things, it's that we don't have a true understanding of how to get to those things in the same way. Yeah. And so I think that that's quite an important thing for us to remember. Just one thing that David was saying, that, is this a bridge we want to cross? That's certainly something Stuart Russell has been saying. That if we're, and Gary Marcus this morning actually in a meeting that we had, if we have built something that we don't trust, that we built with our first wish, to use your King Midas analogy, should we be crossing it? Or should we be saying, let's pause a moment? And I think the third thing, and one of the reasons that I worry a lot about this, and again it picks up something David was saying, is that yes, if the data already exists, then you can get answers from that data. But most of that data was produced by white men over the last millennia. It wasn't produced by women, and it wasn't produced by people of color. So what that actually means is that if we just pause now, if we're only going to be using the data that the LLMs are pulling, then we aren't actually going to be moving our future anywhere we would like it to go.
So, one, I love Kay, and that's, we've known each other for a while, and I want to just give a foot stomp and an amen to what she just said. Two, building on what she said also, it's worth noting that ChatGPT 3.5 is the last time in human history that we can have confidence that an AI model was trained on data that did not include data produced by another AI system that might have been wrong.
Yeah.
And we know, as she mentioned, AI cannibalism, a good way to make deep learning systems go off the rails is to actually feed it data that it itself has produced. Just a little bit makes it go, poof. So how comfortable do you now feel using any other system that has followed ChatGPT 3.5? Again, I'm not out to necessarily bash on deep learning other than to say it might not be the engineering technique we want. The other thing I would say is, again, we each have belief systems, and we each have beliefs as to what we would like done to our person and what we won't want to have done to our person. We have laws. Switzerland has laws. Europe has laws. The World UN doesn't necessarily have laws, but it put forward its guidelines. This is, again, why I think a single solution to try and optimize them all, or a single ring to rule them all, is probably never going to work. But organizations can do it locally. They can do it for their customers in different geographical markets and things like that. And so I raise that because this is a nuanced conversation that's already hard enough when you bring in cybersecurity, let alone you bring in disinformation, let you bring in AI, but it is doable. And the thing that gives me hope is the ability for us to be able to begin to express the beliefs that we want to have happen locally and do this as a grassroots. Because if we try to solve for the entire world, it's never going to get any traction. But if we can solve locally and bubble up, that's how you begin to build the movement, and the movement that's a combination of both belief and cyber practitioners to move it forward.
Okay, awesome. So we will, unfortunately we're out of time, but I think we stop on the or stop or start.
We're trying to save the world here.
Yes. Okay. So let's go
We
get
need
it.
more time.
Let's go about it, right? All right. No, thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. I think we need much more than that, and I think that's why I'll put the plug here that we please join the Responsible Secure AI for Future working group. It convenes every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central U.S. time. If you can, like, put a couple of your comments in. And we are making it a community effort to do this. So I think these are very essential, very, very critical time for our future, and we are building it together. So thank you for contributing to it. Excellent conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.